good, it's bad, because then I kind of lost interest in the day. You understand?
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
see. I'm live now. I'm gonna figure out how I can invite you. Okay, here we go. Um, let
Oh, there
me,
we go.
did you get it?
I did.
Great. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Oh, there's Janine. Yay.
Hi,
Hi. Great to
good
see
to
you
see you
again.
again.
Yeah, great to see you. I
Yeah,
swear, I think we might have been twins in a past life because I feel like whatever you say, I echo, and I hear you echo the same thing. So, anyway, great to have you
for
here.
sure. Thanks.
So today, Janine and I are going to share a chat about the kitchen, and we have lots of things we want to get into. We're going to try to keep this under 20 minutes. If you have questions, just put them in the comments, and we'll keep an eye out for them and make sure that we address them. So the kitchen is, the way I like to look at our kitchen is that it really focuses, it reflects our abundance, but also our vitality. And so we're going to be looking at different aspects of the kitchen. And so I'm going to let Janine jump in on sort of what she thinks are some important things to consider. And then I have some questions for her as well. So Janine, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Thanks, Kimberly. Yes, I think for me, the kitchen is really an important aspect of the home. And I mean, Kimberly and I were just talking about the five elements and how fire is really the central part of that cooking experience in the kitchen. And obviously, sometimes it's still literal fire when you're looking at the gas stoves and you can see the flame and all of that. But it's also kind of almost deeper than just the element of fire. It's kind of what allows fire to burn. So it's like wood and air, and what happens when the fire extinguishes, you get all the ashes that go back into the earth. And so it's almost for me encapsulating all five elements, and then how do you balance that? So that's for me, from kind of an elemental perspective, a really important aspect. And if you think of the historic purpose of fire and how, I mean, it really is so mesmerizing, and how food cooked over fire and open flame almost has a better taste, you know? So you kind of get back to those primitive types of ways of kind of nourishing yourself. So I think that to me is really important. And then also symbolically, you know, being the fire, being that central part of the house is really, really important.
Yes, I agree. And one of the things I love about what you're saying is that, for so many years, we as humans have been in really close connection with the natural world. And it's only been, within the last few hundred years that we've sort of created our homes as like big distinctions between the natural world. And so being mindful of all of those elements and bringing that into our space, whether it's just into our awareness, but also I think all good spaces, like all really nicely designed spaces, touch on those different elements, right? Like
Yes.
just like in the natural world, we experience those elements. And so we want to bring those characteristics into our space.
Yes, and I think kind of the kitchen and the bathroom is obviously those areas where we're explicitly using some of those elements. You know, so I think that's kind of why it's really succinct to start speaking about the elements when we speak about the kitchen and how to kind of balance those elements. Because you can also imagine if the entire kitchen was just kind of the fire element, you know, how it would actually be quite consuming and all consuming. So you kind of need to get a balance, but still having that spark of fire. You know, so I think that's always kind of the more tricky part, how you symbolize it and how you feel in it, and how it kind of sparks you to nourish yourself. And that then also the fire brings in vitality and all of those aspects as well that you mentioned, Kimberly.
So, okay, so with those different elements, so now that we are in the modern world and we have this convenience of having the water next to the fire, next to the cool, as an architect, how do you approach like placement, like with the stove and the sink and the refrigerator? Because, you know, you go into homes and some kitchens just work really effortlessly. And I haven't spent that much time in a commercial kitchen, but I'm sure they've perfected, right? Like the
Yeah.
proximity for the most efficient use of time and space. So would you mind speaking to that a little bit?
So obviously, I think lots of people know about the perfect triangle, and it's not necessarily a mathematical perfect triangle, but it's basically the triangle that you have to create between the stove, the fridge, and the refrigerator. You know, so you need to have those three things connected, but the triangle can be quite flat because you can get a galley kitchen or you can get a large farmhouse kitchen, but that triangle really, really needs to work well. And as you can imagine, it's taking stuff out of the refrigerator, washing things off, and then putting them on the stove or putting them in the oven. So that's more or less the triangle that you need to work with. And there are hundreds of different configurations, and they're dependent on the size of your kitchen, the shape of your kitchen. So all of those things will vary, but that triangle is really, really important. And then obviously you've got like subsidiary little elements, like if you've got a dishwasher, how does that tie in with kind of washing up, rinsing dishes before they go in? I mean, what is that sequence if you're only doing dishes and no dishwasher? So it's kind of dependent on many, many factors, but that triangle is really, really all important.
And so you have like a general rule of thumb for like the distance that each one wants to be from each other, or the distance they want to be from like the workstation, whether it's an island or a kitchen table?
So there's not really a rule of thumb because it depends on your workspace, you know, and obviously like a galley kitchen is completely different to a farmhouse kitchen. And then also, where is the prep work happening? Is it happening linearly? Is it happening around an island? So all of those, I mean, and obviously if it's a compact kitchen, you would actually want these things to be kind of within, I would say, a couple of feet, you know, you don't want to walk miles. But it all is, I mean, it's like how long is a piece of string, unfortunately. There's no golden rule other than the triangle.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
I've had clients where they like it was the space was originally designed to have like 5 feet between the sink, because it was like an island with a sink in it, and then behind that was the stove, and it wasn't a very big kitchen, and it just felt like 5 feet was too much. But it also probably depends on how tall the people are too, right? Like if you have longer legs, then 2 feet's different than 3 feet. So
And I must say, I'm not fond of putting a sink on an island. I mean, like, yes, you can, but I always feel that kind of the sink should go underneath a window, you know, and it shouldn't be the centerpiece. I mean, if you want to put something on the island, I would much rather put the stove onto the island than kind of the washing up and the cleaning up, because also symbolically, what does that represent? You know, so like the core of your kitchen is water, and it's actually kind of distinguishing the fire. So for me, if you want to put something in the center, which, I mean, I'm in two minds. I'm not always that fond, depending on if it's kind of a teaching kitchen or a show kitchen and you kind of want to be showing off and like cooking while entertaining. I think that's then got a place. But I would much rather put the stove on the central island than water, you know, because the kitchen is all about fire. It's not all about water. Yes, water is an important element, but it's not the main focal element, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. So and it's all my personal prerogative, you know, and obviously you need to do what ignites you. Apologies for the pun, but I think kind of water as the central feature of the kitchen is not necessarily for me. In the bathroom, yes, but yeah, not so much in the kitchen.
Okay, that totally makes sense.
So that
Well,
might also have been why it felt off to you. So the distance might not have been the issue, more kind of the elements.
oh, right, right.
Mm.
So, what about this use of like, if we take sort of like a historical look at how kitchens have evolved in like modern culture, and how the kitchen used to be distinctly separate from the living space, from the dining space, and now in our homes everything is happening sort of around the kitchen. The kitchen is like integrating into the living space, and I would love to hear your thoughts about that.
Yes, I think you have to kind of look at the poor man's kitchen and the rich man's kitchen, and those are completely different. And I think it also depends on how much staff you have, and who's preparing the meals and what is that meal prep in terms of your daily life routine. Is it a social event? Because I think cooking has become much more social than what it used to be. Like nobody could see the prep work or the dishes and all of that. And I mean, obviously, people still don't really want to show all their dirty dishes. But the actual preparation and cooking has become much more a social activity than kind of people doing it in a back room where all the smoke and everything's happening. And then just the finished dish miraculously just appears, Yeah. So I think the open plan concept has obviously led to a lot of that. But then also, if you look at like kind of rustic cabins and basic living, I mean, the kitchen table has almost always been a central part of that living space. So we're not too far off from what kind of intuitively was happening, not necessarily like the super duper wealthy estate, but kind of on a basic level. So we're actually kind of returning back to more basics, which I think is great, because the social kitchen table for me is almost the heart of the home. And I'm kind of like, I'd much rather have a kitchen table than an island. An island feels for me quite impersonal, whereas a kitchen table, it has history, it has patina. I mean, I've got my granny's dining room table in my kitchen, and it's like generations of like eating and chatting around the central table. And I wouldn't exchange it for any island in the world,
Yes, yes. Well, and with this idea of how the kitchen has sort of evolved as society has evolved, it also, like, you could look at the difference between like the women's role in the household and how the kitchens have changed too, right? Because as women got more rights and more voice and started working outside of the home, the kitchen started slowly becoming more integrated into the heart of the home, right? Like, you're right, like, it's the heart of the home, but it was disconnected. And now, like, it's just an interesting way of looking at the kitchen and how women have become more empowered. And I know that's probably an entirely different conversation, but it's interesting to see the parallels between the two. As women got more power, the kitchen became more of an open space with
or the more men moved into the kitchen, they forced it to be more integrated into the home. You could also look at it that way, because the man doesn't want to be left in the kitchen like in a little hole. He wants to be part of it all. So there are always different perspectives, but I think that's what's quite fun. There's no clear definition of how it evolved or the specific reasons, but I think it's a fantastic kind of evolution that the kitchen has become more integral, because we can't kind of like box off our like nourishment and vitality into like a little compartment of the house. It really needs to be integrated. And I think it's such an important aspect of our life. So, I mean, yes, whether it's kind of women's lib or ego, who knows, but it's a good move.
Yeah. Well, and so I'd love to like leave people with sort of some tactical things that they could do in their kitchen. And one thing that I recommend is think about your own values around abundance and vitality, and then put on sort of like your detective eyes. And if you had to profile yourself in the kitchen, what you see your kitchen telling you is that reflective of your values and your intentions. And you can open your fridge, and we could have another whole conversation about refrigerators.
Definitely, and the contents thereof.
Yes. How long have the condiments been there? Are they expired? Like, like what
Yes.
refrigerator telling you about, and also your dreams too, right? Like if you want to go
For
to
sure.
Japan, like what kind of things are like reflective of Japan, like anyway. So I'm really curious, Janine, if you have like one like food item that's a kitchen staple that like you cannot live without.
And something like olive oil, so olive oil for me, I mean, in Alabama, I was with Rural Studio, and the one architect who's from Spain, he made us toast with honey and olive oil every single morning. It was the most delicious thing ever. So, I mean, I think olive oil is just so versatile. So that's kind of yeah, my staple. But I must say, I'm not like the biggest cook at all.
Oh.
But I would also say, and like maybe add a pop of red into your kitchen, or some wood elements to nourish that idea of fire, So I think like, and also just the red almost creates instant warmth, which also just kind of gives you that comforting feeling. So yeah, that's kind of what I would say. Bring in a little bit of a fire element, symbolically, obviously, or I mean, in addition to your gas stove and so, or your hibachi grill, and then a bit of wood, and whether it's the color green that you're adding, or actual natural timbers, whether it be like a heirloom kitchen table, dining table, I think those always add warmth in terms of the actual materials and textures as well. And that combination is really super.
I love that. I love that. Okay, well, I'm gonna look at my list because we have a little bit left. Um, and just out of curiosity, like, what are your feelings about the dining room? Like, do you feel like, because it seems like from my experience, the dining room is sort of disappearing, right? And it's becoming more integrated into the kitchen. And are you like, what are your feelings about dining room? And
I think a dining table, and I'm saying a dining table is essential in a home. And whether that dining table be a kitchen table or a dining room table, I'm not too fussed about, or whether you have both. But I think with the open plan concept, the dining room is often kind of parallel to the kitchen, which then lends itself to being kind of a kitchen table, dining table, a little bit more formal, or you can dress it up or dress it down. But I think a dining table is essential for every single household. And whether you're having your breakfast, lunch, dinner, I think it's really an important space to be having conversations, including nourishing your body. But the conversations that happen around a table when you're eating, there is nothing in the world that can replace that and shouldn't be replacing that. And I know like lots of TV dinners and stuff, but you should at least endeavor to have one meal around a table with friends or family. I mean, hopefully daily if you're living with them in the same house, or weekly or monthly if you're not, But there's just, and I mean, chats around a lounge is nothing in comparison to chats around a table. So
yes, I agree. It's like if the kitchen is the heart of the home, the kitchen table or the dining table is like the gravity of the people who live there, or the gravity of the community that you're creating. Yeah.
Yeah.
One last thing I want to add that I just thought of is that if you think about like abundance, and normally we think about abundance as being financial and monetary, but from an anthropological view of humanity, wealth was always represented by food, right? It was like the most wealthy people were the ones who had the most animals and had the most like fruit trees and the biggest gardens
And
and
pineapples. Pineapples with a sense of wealth.
That would be like I don't even I've never lived in a place where pineapples grew. Yeah, but it's like, so letting the kitchen be, letting your celebration of food and letting your display of food be reflective of your abundance, because on a primal level, that's how we see wealth. It's not in plastic debit cards or, paper money,
And it, yes,
right?
and it, as long as it makes you feel good, so that's the thing. So it's not like a showpiece. It's like for you to have the abundance, to think that, you're not going to be starving. So it's that idea of like, you've got enough food, to nourish you and your family, which I think is really important.
Yes, yes. Yeah, and to have those visual cues that remind you of whatever that means for you, and no one else knows what that is, right?
Exactly. And nobody has to, because it's making you feel good.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Janine, this was
So
another delightful conversation. Thank you so
great.
much for making time for this.
No, you're welcome, Kimberly. Thanks for having me.
Okay, thanks everyone for being here. If you have any questions, reach out to either Janine or myself, and we'd be more than happy to get back to you.
Super. And we're chatting about what next week?
Oh, thank you. Yes. We're talking about the bedroom. So
Cool.
definitely your questions about bedroom. We'll be talking about architectural elements, but we'll also be digging into the design of the space and also the emotional, experiential aspects of the bedroom. So thank you for that reminder. It'll be same time, Wednesday at 10:30 a.m. Pacific, which is what time your time?
7:30 SAST, Standard South African Time.
Which
Yeah.
I think is the same as GMT, right?
Oh, we 1 hour or 2 hours, depends on daylight savings. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
So
Okay.
do hopefully we'll
Great.
speak and we'll dive into the bedroom.
Super. Thanks a lot, Kimberly. Cheers.
Thank you, Jane.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Here. Bye-bye.